Today we have Andy Leek with us. He is the Director of VDC for PARIC Corporation, and they started implementing Estimator. They started their search in 2015, which he will tell us more about, but he also is doing a follow-up webinar today from his webinar last April and just giving us an update on what phase his team is in the implementation. And with that, Andy, I will go ahead and let you take it away.
Great. Thanks, Holly. Good morning, everyone. So as Holly said, I'm the Virtual Design and Construction Director with PARIC, which means that I get to do a lot of different things at PARIC that help us integrate technology. And so what we thought we'd do today is give everybody an update. If you chimed in with us last year, we were right in the throes of developing an implementation around DESTINI Estimator. And so we're a year in and we've made great progress. So we're going to talk a little bit about that today. For those of you that this is the first time you've heard from us, so just to give you a little information on PARIC and kind of how we are set up around technology. So we're a St. Louis-based contractor, so right in the Midwest, and we're a growing company. We've been around for quite a while, but technology has always been the root of a lot of the work that we do, and so we continue to evolve our use of technology. And even though BIM has been around for a little while, there's still a lot of work around that seems to be coming every day. So one of the things that's important about technology for PARIC is that you've got to start with a really good support base. So that means getting not only the team and the users that are going to be utilizing the technology to support a change like this, but also getting the executive team involved and making sure that they understand what this is going to mean. We have a lot of very busy people working on a lot of projects today, and pulling them away to do implementation training and reviewing database changes and that kind of thing is somewhat time consuming. And so you need to make sure that everybody understands what the road ahead looks like. And so we started this process back in 2015. And where we kind of thought we would start this morning is with a brief recap. So you probably saw some of these slides last year. It's intentional. We kind of wanted to just cover this territory again. I know that while some of the people on the call are probably right in the throes of doing an implementation with Estimator, some of you are probably just now considering this idea, and it's a big change. It's a lot of work to make sure you do it and you do it well. And so we thought we'd share some of our experience along the way here and kind of talk about why we made the change. So with that, in reality, we started this process back in 2015, almost earlier than that actually, and trying to find tools that were out on the market that could support BIM workflows. We were looking at our estimating platform that we had, knowing that it was a legacy tool that was no longer going to be supported, and so we needed to make that leap. And so we went to work trying to find viable solutions that could bring the functionality that we really needed. And so, before we went too far down that road, we want to understand, well, why is it that we're changing? We know that it's a legacy platform, but beyond that, what else is going to drive us to change and for the betterment of the company? And so we wanted to redefine our goals. So I put on here kind of in bright orange that we redefined our goals. So we went through this process a few times as we brought more people into the team that was going through this process. We got a lot of passionate feedback around what was important in the new system. And so it ranged everything from 2D takeoff to the way that an estimate looks, the way that it prints, the types of reports you get out of it, the way you can sort the data in a WBS. And there was a lot of different things that we had to take in consideration. And on top of that was the ability to leverage all of the new 3D model content from BIM and cloud-based platforms like BIM 360, which we're going to talk a little bit about here today. But the big picture items was we really wanted to have an integrated platform. And so the idea there is we're trying to break down silos and democratize that entire process so that while you didn't have to be a Revit expert, you could get into a model just as you could get into a PDF drawing and be able to interpolate that information and get it into your estimate efficiently. So kind of going down through here, and again, I won't read all the slides, but the number one reason was we were dealing with a legacy software. On top of that, we had a lot of new people that we were bringing on board as we're growing, taking on a lot more projects, which meant that our pre-con department was getting overloaded with work. And we needed to find a more efficient way to do quantity takeoff and get through the estimating process. As many of you know, it's a very iterative process to go through, especially on some jobs that are complex. And so to be able to help that workflow, we were trying to find tools that would support that and have us understand where we started and where we ultimately ended up on a budget, and be able to explain that to our clients in a timely manner. So another important key to this whole finding of a new product was that we wanted to find a company that was going to be very nimble and work with us. And we all estimate in a similar fashion, but there are things that PARIC does that's unique to us and our geographic area that we're focused on, just as there are with all of your companies. And so we wanted to find a company that was going to work with us really well. And so as we ultimately settled in and decided that BeckTex was going to be the right company to work with, we found their team was really willing to go the extra mile and hear us out on our ideas and our needs and really work together with us. And so it's a really important part of this is that you create a partnership with a vendor like this that you can bounce off ideas, and some of the ideas may sound silly, but there's value in all the insight and input that we get from our team members, and so we really try to take that into consideration. So kind of moving forward, we had to set up needs and goals. So obviously we needed to create a transition that was as painless as possible, but also gained us the new capabilities and really a stable platform that we could rely on. And so the first step of that is we needed to be able to replace a system that we had and all the minimum capabilities that it had as well. So that meant we had to be able to do 2D takeoff, we had to be able to do an estimate, and we had to be able to do budget tracking. Those seem fairly straightforward, but again, a lot of things go into doing an estimate. You have your line items, your assemblies, the way that you report that data, the formatting of the pages, all the little details matter. And as I mentioned, we have a lot of passionate people about the way that things look, the way they calculate, even getting into the weeds around calculating bonds and taxes and fees and all kinds of things. So it gets very complex very quick. And then of course there was the underlying need as we move forward that we're going to want to expand the capabilities of the system and try to not have so many external software to support the process. So unique to Estimator was that all the quantity takeoff was inside of this platform instead of having to have a third-party tool. And while it has evolved a lot over the last year or so, there's still things that we've found that we would love to see, and the Beck team is working very diligently to bring those new features to us. So as we move a little farther out here, we had to develop a rollout plan. So it's great that we have an integrated platform. It's great that we're going to have all these new tools, but how are we actually going to do this? So you're going to have training involved with a lot of very busy people, as I mentioned. There's going to be database management that's going to need to take place. We work really well with Beck, and they helped us to create our new database. But at some point, we needed to take that over, and that meant that somebody was going to have to be trained in that and become the administrator for that new database. And then finally, reports and dashboards. All the information goes in, we have to get it back out, and it has to be in formats that make sense to us or to our clients. All right, so kind of roll through this. I mentioned earlier that after you've selected your goals and gone through all the different parts of defining a new system that's going to work for you, it really comes back to getting buy-in from the team that's going to actually use the software. There's nothing worse than purchasing software and it sits on the shelf. And so I can tell you that this wasn't the easiest thing. As with most software, it's never easy to select a new tool and it automatically just go. But we kind of went through this process a few times and were able to get the teams set up in a way that they were able to learn the software, not just do dark conference room training and forget about it. They were actually to learn it and immediately start applying it in the field or in the office on a project. So that was something that is always a challenge on projects, and something that we spend a great deal of time making sure we do correctly. Also important here is to understand that what does the process look like that we're trying to solve for. So many of our projects are design build, design assist, CM, and we get all types of contracts. We are focused on primarily vertical projects, but we work with all types of design teams, all types of architects and engineers. And so as as we're working with these different partners, we're going to get information in different ways. And again, what was important here is that as we built our estimate and knowing that we were going to want to use models to help with our quantity takeoff, the system had to be somewhat agnostic about who the designer or the author of those models were, because everybody names model elements differently. And while in the base, the way that it's classified may be the same, there's some uniqueness to each design team, and so we needed to be able to work with that. And so Estimator helps us in doing that. Let's see. So implementation planning. So this is kind of fast forwarding a little bit to when we really started to get busy. And so right at the very beginning, we took a step back once we did our kickoff meeting and said, okay, what do we actually have in terms of a database that we want to keep? We kind of audited all of our database line items, our assemblies, the way the reports were set up, and even things like our phase codes that go into our accounting system. We went from roughly 60,000 line items in a database to I think around 5,000 or 6,000. So it was a significant purge of information, and that brought to light the fact that the database that we had, although it was great and it served us well, it really needed to have just a complete rebuild from the ground up. If we were going to do it, we wanted to do it really well this time again and have a fresh start in 2018. And so that's what we set out to do. And it took us about a year to truly build this to the level that we wanted it to be. We actually took a couple of steps back and reassessed what we had at different points to make sure that we were getting it right and we were getting feedback from our teams. Like with anything, until you roll it out on active projects, you're going to miss some things. But we tried to eliminate those types of mistakes as much as we could. Now, I will tell you it wasn't perfect. When we rolled it out, we still saw some holes in the data that we needed to fill out. But until you're actively using it on a project, you just don't see those things, and they're kind of blind spots. This also allowed us to clear some of our phase codes in our accounting system. You can imagine using an estimating system for 30 some odd years, and one day you realize that a lot of line items have been created, or phase codes rather, have been created that no longer are useful in our accounting system. So we were able to do a little house cleaning on the accounting group as well, and I think that helps us all in the long term. We also rebuilt our work breakdown structures. Obviously, we want to do the ones that everybody knows, whether it's a 16 division CSI or what have you, but we added some other ones that helped us with manipulating Revit models and Navisworks models, things like that we knew were going to be out there, and we wanted to get out ahead of that. And then finally, the rollout, how we were going to transition into new projects. We took this in two different ways. We did a couple of pilot projects where we could see the results from one model or from one estimate to the next. We also did projects just right out of the gate, and we're spot checking parts of the estimate to see if it was on target. And that was kind of where we took off with it. And of course, as I've mentioned this a couple times, everybody is very busy, and so getting our team members to be able to focus on this was something that we really had to wrestle with and make sure that we could apply their time and not lose the time that was spent on training. All right, so where we're at today. So we basically broke this down into 4 phases. We kind of re-specified this a couple of times as we went through this. Goal 1 was always to rebuild our database, our reports, and our analytical tools. We spent, as I mentioned, about a year doing that, and we're continuing to refine and tweak the database that we have today. We wanted to be able to come out of the gate and do estimates as we had done before, but as we move forward, we're looking at things around self-perform work and special projects that are a little different in the way that we build those assemblies. So phase 2A, this is where we kind of broke this into some pieces, was we wanted to do a large training group so that we could get as many people as possible into the system at once so that they could support one another in the training process. It's one thing to sit in a conference room and understand all the picks and clicks, but it's another thing 2 days later when you're using it on a job, and the ability for each other to do kind of cross-training amongst themselves and ask questions and, hey, do you remember how that worked? Was really important. So we did a large team rollout. I think we trained about a dozen people over the course of a day or two, and that was really important for getting started. We identified, I think, 4 pilot projects right out of the gate, and we've been wrapping those up here over the last couple of months. I should mention that this large team rollout happened in January of this year, so this is all fresh, things that have just happened. As we looked a little farther out, we knew that the BIM 360 integration was going to be coming, and so we started to do prep work around that, around what elements we would be able to take off first, and where that would save us some time in the takeoff process. And then looking farther out, probably Q3 of this year is the expanded team rollout. So we're going to be able to train our special projects group to take on smaller TI type projects, but also our self-perform work. We do concrete and interior stud layout and that kind of thing. And so we wanted to start to bring those folks into the fold as well. And then, of course, expand into additional markets. So we started with a couple core markets that are fairly straight building types of buildings, such as office buildings, where they have all the traditional elements of a project, but not so sophisticated as, say, a hospital or a building like that. So moving on, we had to identify our core implementation team, which really consisted of leaders of estimating, but then also power users that will be able to adapt the software quickly and help us vet out any problems that we had early on so that we could tweak the system as it rolled into more and more projects. And so today we're reviewing our new content, our new database, our new assemblies. We're tweaking some of the workflows and processes. As we do that, we're in constant contact with BeckTech around what we would like to see evolve in the platform. And then, of course, reviewing deliverables, reports, and dashboards. And then going back to these pilot projects, comparing them against previous estimates that were done in our legacy system to see that we're getting good results. Now, as I mentioned, not everything gets taken off from a model or from 2D drawings. A lot of things are more straightforward, like general conditions. Some gaps that we have seen in that, we've had to go back and tweak. Hindsight's always 20/20, but that's one of the areas that we've had to go back and look at and make sure that we have everything included and be able to evolve that quickly. Today we've got about 6 active projects through this platform. We've trained now 14 users, and I know we've hired on a couple of other estimators that we're bringing into the training process right now. We're in 2 of our core markets. Actually, I think we actually have broken into our 3rd market this week, and it just happened yesterday. And we're right in the middle of our BIM 360 integration. So the BIM 360 integration is really an exciting piece to this. We started as part of part of our agreement with BeckTech early on was that we wanted to be able to really leverage BIM in our takeoff process. We're a BIM 360 enterprise client as well, and so the whole idea here is that we democratize how people access models, how they can be a part of utilizing that information and really leverage it to its fullest extent. And so what we did early on with BeckTech was do a strategy session and talk about how we use BIM 360, how we could possibly access it. And so that turned into a very collaborative partnership between BeckTech, PARIC, and ultimately Autodesk and the BIM 360 team. The Forge platform is allowing us to do more and more things every day. Chief among that for this is that we can bring updated models into Estimator on a weekly basis or however often they're updated, and be able to see things that change. So instead of sifting through piles of drawings and trying to understand what has changed from one week to the next or one release of drawings to the next, the models are in constant update. So you can see, from day to day what has changed. And now, of course, we have to take in consideration what's going on with the design team and understand what areas of the model are really ready to be, really examined and applied to the estimate. And so some of these things we're able to go in and adapt very quickly. Some of the others we stay off of, and it's a communication thing that we have to work through. Part of this also requires model prep and understanding what in the model can really be taken off that's going to save us time. Not everything in the model is usable to us right now, and not everything in the model, or not everything is included in the model that's a part of our takeoff. And so we, as we train our team on, what they can get gleaned from the model and what they're going to have to go back to the drawings for or the specs, these are all important things that the team understands, because there's no easy button. I know there's a lot of misconception around using models for estimating. It's simply not an easy button where you click the model and automatically your estimate's created. You really have to understand the parts and pieces you're going to be able to utilize. So what's next for us is, as we look out in 2018, we're obviously right in the throes of BIM 360 integration into our projects. We're doing a lot of refinement in our general conditions. This is not so much a reality of using the Beck platform, it's more of looking at what we've been doing and how we could refine this section. We're doing weekly reviews of our database estimates with our estimating team now, to go through and make sure that not only do they understand how the assemblies are set up and how they're supposed to be used, but that we haven't missed anything or that we don't have any inaccuracies in the data. As I mentioned, we're adding on our self-perform group and their unique assemblies and line items. It's interesting to have a self-perform group in-house. It's essentially like having a subcontractor that is giving you very detailed estimates, which is a little different than a traditional estimate. And so that's something that we are working on now to bring that into our system and be able to leverage that information. And then as we look out, like I mentioned earlier, we're adding additional core markets now. That's a big focus for 2018, and we hope to have the entire estimator platform apply to all projects by the end of this year. And so finally, we're expanding our capabilities of use with BIM 360, and that's something that we're very passionate about. This is one of the central things to our database, or I'm sorry, to our technology stack, is BIM 360 is utilized in various ways for all of our projects, and for it to be an integrated part of BIM or of DESTINI Estimator is has been very important to us, and we're very excited about it today. So with that, Holly, I believe that is a wrap for where we're at as of 2018 today. If we're going to do any questions, I think we could do that now.
Okay, sounds great. We do have some questions coming in. If we don't get to yours in the next few minutes, we will definitely follow up with an email or phone call after, but please do feel free to keep submitting those. Before we get started, we did just have a question come in saying, is the BIM 360 integration available to everyone, or is it just PARIC? And I just want to touch on that. It is available to everyone, every estimator client. It is part of the software. So just going forward, Andy, I know you mentioned hindsight is 2020. What would you have done differently at the beginning of your implementation?
I don't know that there was anything particularly different we could have done in terms of our initial strategy. I think it was more a matter of when we had some slow spots in the development of assemblies or line items, we could have spent a little bit more time on general conditions. I think it was a blind spot for us, where we were really focused on developing good estimate tools, and GCs just kind of fell to the wayside a little bit. We quickly picked them back up, and we did usher them along throughout the process, but I think it was one of the areas that we didn't focus on as much, just because we thought it was more straightforward. And truly it was just an area that we didn't spend as much energy on initially.
Okay. And then what was the most unanticipated issue with your implementation?
Really, it was the amount of work coming in the door. I think was one of our biggest challenges, was being able to set up training and get the team focused on that. Even though we've trained 14 people, not every one of the 14 people have been able to focus on projects right out of the gate, and we have various projects at different levels of development in that pre-con process. And so while we continue to pull more people into projects, the workload coming through the door is just a constant. It's a great thing, but it's also a challenging thing to plan around, and I think that's one of our challenges today.
Okay. And then whenever y'all do hire someone new, how does that training look like in regards to the software?
So as I mentioned, we just started rolling out Estimator in January, and so we're trying to bring people in and keep them or enable them to be a proactive part of their first 90 days. As kind of they come in right out of the gate and they're able to bring value and be challenged. So the roundabout answer to that is they kind of have to do dual duty a little bit. So on projects that are already in our legacy platform, they're having to learn enough of it to kind of help out with that. But what we're really focusing on is training them in the new platform so that they come out of the gate able to use the new tools, able to leverage models and really work towards what our future plan is. And so we're still in early days on that, but that's where we're focused.
Okay. And then a question around the database. I know you mentioned that that was just a huge undertaking, cleaning it up. How are you handling the database management? Are all new items run through a database administrator, or are individual team members able to add as they build new estimates?
So the way that we've been doing this is we have a couple of people that are really focused on the development of the database. We still work closely with Beck Technology to help us with refining some of our approaches to the way that we do our assemblies. We've always had a very complex set of database assemblies and line items that we've worked with in the past. And so as we're getting input from different team members, we're really kind of funneling that through just a couple of people who can understand, what we already have covered, what's unique about the request, and then ultimately to help build that out. But we try not to have too many cooks in the kitchen, so really we're down to just a couple of people that are manipulating the database.
Okay. And then I think just one more question to wrap up. Going back to your evaluation process and just the really beginning stages of implementation, how did you decide who was in your core group?
So, well, our core group of users from within PARIC, I guess is the question?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay. So what we did was we identified who our lead estimators were, people who were engaged in large and small projects, knew the PARIC approach to doing estimating, and were very well versed in that. We had leadership from the pre-construction and estimating group. We also had some leadership from our executive leadership panel that wanted to make sure that they understood and were involved with supporting this type of an implementation. This is, as I mentioned, is not a small undertaking. There's a lot of resources that get consumed in terms of time. It's not just the cost of the software. It's really the time that you have to commit to rebuilding a database and really making sure we get it right. So we had leadership at a couple different levels, and then of course myself and a couple other members of the VDC group were involved, because as we look farther out, we wanted to be able to start leveraging BIM in our quantity takeoff work. And so it really took knowledge from how we do quantity takeoff, how we do estimating, how we do self-perform work, and ultimately who's going to put together an estimate that's got real subcontractor bid information involved. And so we tried to pull in as many active people that we thought was really going to help bring value to that conversation. I think in total we had around 6 or 8 people at any given time, and that changed over the course of the couple of years we were working on this, as different people could be brought in that brought value in a particular area.
Okay, thank you for that, Andy. We did just have one more come in around permission levels. Have you found any issues surrounding permission levels, and can you speak to how PARIC is handling that?
Yeah, so again, this kind of goes back, I believe, to the administrative aspects of this. The way that you're able to update line items and assemblies can be somewhat confusing to you if you haven't done it before. Again, what we've done is we have a group of people that are kind of power users that are pulling information from the different groups. We're funneling that back through a primary administrator, and they're making the updates, and then we just communicate that we're pushing changes back out to the teams. We try to keep not too many people at the administrative level. So really we only have, I think right now we have 4 administrators that have access, but really only 1 or 2 people are making changes to the database.
Okay. Well, thank you, Andy. I think we're going to go ahead and wrap up the presentation for today, but I wanted to thank you all for attending, and thank you, Andy, for presenting.
Thank you. Bye-bye.